Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 12 of our Salesforce admin training. And today we are starting a new session of our training, which is becoming a Salesforce administrator. So what that means is that anything we're going to be doing from here on, it's pretty much technical. By technical, I don't mean to scare you away, but it requires you to use your initiative, your common sense to do certain things. So we've learned how to create objects, how to create fields. We've learned how to insert data into those objects. And we've learned how to use some of the applications of Salesforce, out of the box applications. By applications, I mean the objects and what those objects can do. So now it's more or less how to solve problems. You're given a problems, you're given a scenario. What are you going to do? This is where you become a Salesforce admin. Normally, what I do during this stage is give projects, and you will be working on a project, but because we're taking a different approach for this training, the project will be done after the entire training, so it can be very comprehensive, and you have at least 2 weeks to work on that project instead of you learning and working on a project simultaneously. Is a different approach. Let's see how that goes. And based on it, we can get feedback on how to implement things going forward in subsequent cohorts. Having said that, let's go into details of what we're going to be learning today. We're going to learn how data and analytics work in Salesforce. So basically, you've seen everything about Salesforce and you love it, but now you don't expect all those data you see to come, out of the box. Sometimes you might be moving from a legacy system into Salesforce, and your company would ask you, can you move all this data from this system to this system? I mean, by this system, I mean Salesforce. How would you go about doing that? And sometimes they might want to ask you, can you give me a record of all the leads in the system? I want to reach out to all the leads that are registered within the last 7 days. These are questions business would ask you. And it is not just administrative stuff, it's you becoming a Salesforce admin, meaning that this is what you might be challenged to do at work. I've told you, mostly as a Salesforce admin, you'll be creating users, updating profiles, but in a different organization, let's say a very small business, they'll be asking you to do something consultants will be doing. And this is where you get to know about those stuffs, okay? Today, we're going to learn how to import data, update data, transfer data, mass deletes, mass updates, and the likes of data, okay? We're going to learn how to use validation tools to validate data, to ensure that the data you're putting into the system is actually the right data and is valid, okay? We're going to learn about creating reports and how that impacts data visibility. For instance, if you have a report in the Salesforce and you're asked to create a report, if you have a data in Salesforce, you're asked to create a report. How does the sharing model of the org impact the report's data, the report it generates from the data from the Salesforce org? Those are the kind of things we are going to be looking at. And obviously, how to automate reports, how to send reports to your manager on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Everything, hopefully, at the end of the session, at the end of this series, you'll be able to know how to do that, as well as hopefully when the project begins, you'll be able to use this knowledge to work on your project. Okay, I like to break things down in bullet points, and this is expectation from what we're going to be learning during this series. Okay, data import wizard, data loader, what are they used for in Salesforce? Data export services, report and custom type, creating dashboard, and the likes, okay? Without wasting much time, I will go right into the org, Salesforce training org, which is the trailhead.salesforce.com, and I will log in into my Salesforce org, okay? So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to go to my hands-on orgs. And I'm going to launch my Salesforce org, which I've been using for the training. And now this is again your Salesforce org, okay? And as you can see, we have some data in here. We have some data in the opportunities objects. I can change this display to list view. We have data in account objects and the likes, okay? So now, when it comes to data in Salesforce, data can be imported, exported, or transferred within the Salesforce using different methods, okay? So today I'm going to be focused, I'll focus on two main methods which you can get data into Salesforce. The one is using the data imports wizard and the other is data loader. I'm going to explain those stuff shortly, okay? The different tools you can use, and when you're using the tool, you need to know how to use the right tool for the right task. For instance, you have large amounts of data. Are they over certain number? If they are over certain number, then you need to know what tool to use to get those data into Salesforce. Are they less than certain number? If yes, you need to know what tools to use to get those data, okay? So now we have two, majorly we have two. The first one is data import wizard. What is a data import wizard and how do we use it in Salesforce? Data import wizard can be accessed from the setup. It is a tool that enables you to import data into Salesforce, and it can be accessed from the setup, and you type data import wizard, okay? Data import wizard is on the quick find, and once you open the data import wizard, you can perform different tasks. But one thing you need to know about data import wizard is this. It enables you to load large amount of data into Salesforce. However, there is a limit on the large amount of data you can import. But before then, let's see how it works. We go to the home, we do the quick find, we click on data import wizard, and you can see you can import data using 3 steps. The first is you choose the data you want to import. But obviously, before you start selecting the data you want to import, you need to have prepared the data. So don't just get data from legacy system and you just import it straight off into Salesforce. No, you have to first of all get the data and make sure that the data is clean. Prepare your data. This is something you have to do in advance. So don't expect all the data you're bringing in from the legacy system to go straight inside your Salesforce org. It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, some of the data will not go in. So what if certain data you want to put in a certain field does not exist? How do you ensure that those data are present? You need to create those fields. Let's say you're importing data into the leads object. And in one of the leads objects, you have what they call premiership. You have what they call subscription plan. Or maybe, yeah, let's just say subscription plan. And by default, obviously, Salesforce does not have what they call subscription plan in the lead object. So if you're importing data that has subscription plan as a field on the lead object, you need to have first of all created that field in Salesforce. If you don't create subscription plan field, the data you're bringing in from legacy system will not be able to map into that field. So the next step after selecting the data which you want to import is to map those fields. You need to map those fields such that the data you are importing maps with the fields that you have in Salesforce. These are fields. Phone, mobile, fax, email, these are fields. If these fields do not exist in Salesforce, the data will not import. So you need to map those fields, okay? And you need to review and import. So how do you do that? How do you get started? You click on Launch Wizard. And once you launch Wizard, it will guide you through the process. But one thing you need to know is this. Import data using the interface. Data import wizard, you can only import up to 50,000 records at a time. Meaning that if any data is above 50,000 records, you need to use a different tool. This is where the selection of tool matters when you are trying to import data into Salesforce. Again, you can import data using the data import wizard as long as the data records is less than 50,000, okay? So 50,000 or less. Number 2, you cannot just import any data because you can use data import wizard. There are limitations. What are the limitations? You can import account and contacts, leads, solutions, and campaign members. So what does that mean? I cannot import opportunities using data import wizard. Look at the standard objects. You know, I told you about Salesforce having standard objects. These are the only standard objects you can import using the data import wizard, okay? Accounts and contacts, leads, solutions, and campaign members. So what does that mean? It means that I cannot import opportunities, I cannot import campaigns, I cannot import tags and the likes, okay? However, for the custom objects, the ones which you created yourself, you can import as many custom objects as possible. So if you're loading data into Salesforce and the data is less, the records are less than 50,000 and it's a custom object, feel free to use Salesforce data import wizard, okay? Feel free to use data import wizard to load this data. In addition to that, when you load a record, one of the key things for a record is this. One individual record has what they call the record ID. This record ID is a unique identifier in the system. It helps you to identify this particular record. Just like in a database, SQL database, you have primary keys. You know, the primary keys is unique. If I want to query into any table, any database, I'm going to write maybe select ID from this table, right? This is the ID that I'm querying from a typical SQL table. This is what they call the Salesforce ID. The Salesforce ID is unique in the org. For instance, if you want to get this record in the system, I can just say select ID where this ID, select ID from opportunities where ID equals this, and I'll get this record and all the details of this record, okay? So that's one thing you need to put into consideration when loading record. And the reason why you have to put that into consideration is this. When you're importing data, you have the option to import by creating new records into the system. And you also have the option of updating, meaning that for me to update a record in the system, I need to have this ID present. If this ID is not present, then I am technically importing data into the system. So it is very important to know what operation you are performing. Whenever they ask you to import data, ask, is this data already in the system? Am I just updating this data? Then you have to select update existing data. If this data is new, that is not in the system previously, you select the add new record. However, if you have a mixture of a new record and an existing record, then you can select what they call add new and update an existing records, okay? Add new and update an existing record. This is what they refer to as upsat in Salesforce. So this is like insert, this is like update, this is like upsat. Upsat meaning I am updating and I am inserting a record. So let's take a quick pause on data import wizard and go to the other ways which we can import data. I told you there are two major ways, right? The first one is data import wizard. The other one is data loader, which I'm going to talk about in subsequent sessions for the day. But I just want to kind of like give you the difference between the data loader and the data import wizard. So now we go to data loader. What is data loader? Data loader is a client tool. By client tool, I mean it is outside of this org. It means you have to download it on your computer. You have to open it like you're opening an application, and you have to follow the instruction. We're going to try both of them today, but I just want to give you an idea what it is and why it is different from the data import wizard, okay? As you can see, we have the data loader, and data loader, if you want to download data loader, you go to the recommended, you download this file, but you need to go through the recommended instruction guide because it can be very complicated when you are loading the data loader at first. So you need to go through the installation guide and make sure that you follow the instructions given for installing data loader. So for instance, you need to install this, you need to install this, you need to do all this action 1 to 6 before you can make data loader work. However, let's not divert the attention to installation. Let's focus on why would you use data loader over data import wizard? The first thing you need to consider is this: data loader can help you load all up to 5 million records. As you can see, I'm going to open another window so you can easily compare Data Import Wizard and Data Loader. With Data Loader, you can load up to 5 million records. With Data Import Wizard, you can only load 50,000 records. Okay, so if your data is 50,001, then you have to use Data Loader. Number two, with Data Loader, you can load any object, data into any object, opportunities, lead, tags, event, whatever it is, you can load data into that object. However, with Data Import Wizard, you have limitations in the standard object you can load data into. Okay, you can only load data into accounts, leads, solutions, and campaign member. With Data Loader, you need to be a system admin in order to use Data Loader. So when you download Data Loader, you want to log in as a system admin. Any other user cannot use Data Loader. So the profile of the user that can log into Data Loader, which I'm going to show you shortly, must be a system administrator profile for that user. So if you have a user that is not system admin, they cannot use Data Loader because a system admin can do anything. Imagine being able to load data into any object without any restrictions. That's what Data Loader gives you. In addition, Data Import Wizard is obviously a user interface, meaning that I can load data from the user interface. So how does it work? You click on Launch Data and you select, let's say you select the accounts records and you click on Add New Record and you upload the data, okay? You upload the data and you can do the matching. But before we do an example of this, let's keep on talking about the difference between data imports and Data Loader, okay? So number three, I said 50,000 record to 5 million record. I said is user interface, and the other one, you have to download the client application. One, I said not anyone, but anyone that has access to the setup might be able to use Data Import Wizard if they're given a permission. However, for Data Loader, only the system admin can load data into the system. In addition to that, this is one of the most critical, one of the most important aspects of using the difference between the Data Loader and Data Import Wizard. Trigger workflow rules and processes. What does this mean? It means if I am loading data using the Data Import Wizard, I have the option to say, I want to trigger. I know you might not know what workflow is right now, or processes or flows, whatever it is, but I have this at the back of your mind that you have the option to say, I want to trigger the workflow rules. I want to trigger the processes. What are these to Salesforce? These are background processes. Let's say in our case assignment through, we've said after assigning case to XYZ user, send an email. After sending an email, update the status of the case. That's background processes. That's workflows. That's processes in place we put to do certain things, right? With Data Import Wizard, you have an intuitive way of saying, I don't want to trigger, or I want to trigger. However, with Data Loader, it will always trigger. So you don't have that option when it comes to Data Loader. You don't have the option to disable this trigger. It will always trigger. So what you need to do is disable the workflow so it doesn't trigger. You have to disable the workflow, but you cannot do that from a Data Loader point of view. Unlike Data Import Wizard that gives you that option to check. Because it's user interface, you can check and uncheck. But for Data Loader, you don't have this user interface. In addition to that, you can determine the record type you are loading data into from the data import. But for Data Loader, you have to specify that record type in the CSV. So it's very important to know that difference. And based on that difference, you can do a lot of things. Predominantly, both of them requires you to load CSV, a CSV file, meaning that you cannot load an Excel format file, you cannot load a JSON file, you can only load a CSV file. So now, how can we load data using Data Import Wizard? The best way is to get data. So let's create a dummy data. I'm going to go to Gmail. I'm sorry, not really Gmail, but my intention is to go to Sheet, Google Docs, okay? So I can create a sample data loader for me to work for, a sample data for me to work with. So now I want to load data into the account object, okay? And I will just let me go to the setup, and I'll go to Object Manager. Then I'll go to the account. I'll go to Fields and Relationship. The reason why I'm going here is just because I want to grab fields, okay? So you don't have to go through this process in order to load data into the system. Alternatively for you, you can go to Reports. Once you go to Reports, then you can just create a report and export a sample report. That sample report will now be your base template to work with, because it has all the fields for an account object that you're interested in. But this is like the manual way of doing this. So I want to load name, okay? I'll just put name. I want to load account number. But remember, you have to use the API name. The API name is a field name, okay? So don't use the label. The label and the API name, they are different. This is the field you need to use. You don't use this label, although you can still do the mapping, which is fine. But if you can load them without having to do an extra step of activity, then that's fine, right? Then record type. But then again, this is record type ID. There's also what they call record type name. So I'll keep that. I'll keep this like that for, I know it's going to fail, but let's keep it this way for now. Account source, which is, let me use this active. Active, I'm guessing the option is yes or no, okay? So active, yes or no, right? Then I go back again and I look for another field of interest, but you need to make sure you're loading the required fields. Otherwise, there should be a default required fields, okay? Number of employees is a good field to have. Then I put number of employee, but there's also what they call the record type name, okay? If you have a record type on the object, you have to, as you can see, when you're using the data imports wizard, if I go back to the data imports wizard, I click on this, look at this. Because you have a record type, you have to specify the record type, okay? You have to specify the record type. But if you don't have a record type, then you don't have to specify the record type. So you can put what they call the record type name. But then again, the API says record type ID, but because we have the name, I can use the name. But again, if you have the ID, you can use the ID. Remember, I showed you how you can get the ID of any record. So this is how you get the ID of any record. It's on the URL. This is the ID of any record, okay? So just giving you a heads up on that. So now we have these fields that we want to load into the system. I am going to say the account name. I want it to be, let's just load banks in Canada, okay? CIBC, BMO, sorry, CIBC. Then we have BMO, and we have TD, okay? Account number, I'll just give a random number. Active, yes, no, yes, no, okay? The number of employees, 5, 4, 6, 2. And record type, what are the options for record type? We have internal accounts and external accounts, okay? Internal accounts, external accounts, okay? So I'll just copy this and copy this, and I will put it here. So now we have a sample record we want to load into the system. Obviously, you don't have to use data import wizard or data loader to load 4 records. If you feel like it's just 4 records and it's just these 5 columns, you can just type it in. What stops you from creating an account record and just enter those data, right? But you use data import when you have a lot of data and you don't want to do a manual work. You use data imports or data loader when you don't want to do manual work. In addition to that, you use data import when you have a lot of fields and you don't want to make mistakes. Maybe you're given sensitive data and making mistakes is not an option. Then you use that, okay? So don't just use data import because you know how to use it. Use it because there's a need for you to use it. So now I'll call this account to load. Okay, account to load. But guess what? I told you that you can only load a CSV file. Okay, you can only load a CSV file. So if you want to download this, you have to make sure that you're downloading a CSV file. Okay, so now that we have the CSV file, okay, I'm just going to go to my data import. I said it's account, add new. I want to match contact by. If you don't want to match contact by anything, you can leave it because I'm not loading contact. I'm just loading an account. And you want to match account name by something. If you want to match it by name, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just leave it. Okay. And do I want to have a trigger? I don't want to have a trigger. I'll just leave it. Okay. Then after that, I want to also make sure that because I've already specified the record type, because this is data import. This is data import. I'm forced. Well, I wouldn't say forced. I'm more or less required to select. Okay, I'm more or less required to select the record type, which obviously kind of like limits our flexibility for this. So I'm gonna delete this, or I can just make it internal. But remember, you have the liberty of not mapping this. Even let me leave it that way. I have the liberty of not mapping it. Okay, I have that liberty of not mapping it if I'm not interested. I click on CSV, then I select the CSV which I'm interested in. Okay, let me go to the folder which I downloaded it into. Just give me 1 minute. Let me look for the folder. The folder is just 1 minute. Okay, let me look for the folder. Blackforce and Blackforce data. Then this is account to load. Okay, so now this is CSV. Make sure you select the character code, and obviously the CSV is comma separated. You go to next. Now, this is where I told you, right? You will do the mapping. Right now, it says we have two names, and you're loading into account object and contact object. It's now asking you which of the name do you want. I'm going to change it to account name because that's what I want. I map. So you need to ensure that you're mapping the right fields in the CSV to the right field on the mapping file. Okay. Account number is already mapped. That's good. This one says on map. Let's map it. I'm looking for active. Okay. And this is active. Okay. I mapped it. Fine. Now it's saying record type name. It doesn't know what that record type name is. Let's see. Record type. But like I told you, because we already selected account record type, but we already selected the internal record type. So eventually our data will be going to the internal anyway, because that's what we've selected. If we have the option of not selecting, then it will go to the selection here. But having said that, we've selected the account record type just for justification purposes. Then we go to next. So now it tells you that you are loading into the account object. You're adding records into the account object. This is a CSV file name, and you've mapped 5 fields correctly. Okay, then you start the imports. This will be done behind the scene, and you will get an email once the import is completed. Again, this will be done behind the scene. You'll get an email once the import is completed. However, you can now see your import data jobs. It tells you insert, the status is closed. That means it has been completed, and you can see the results. Record process 4, record failed 0, retry count 0, completed as a status. You can also view the result of this. Okay, you can view the results to see the result of what you've done. Success, that means it has created these records and it is true. Okay, so this is an evidence that the data you have imported into the system is successful. Now, what you need to do is go back to the account objects and see, you can even sort by recent date, right? So let's include the field to display, and I'm going to call it created date. Okay, I want to view by created date. Is that created date there? C. Okay, created dates. Then I can sort by created date. Okay, as you can see, we loaded TD, BMO, CIBC, RBC, and as you can see, the details. Okay, so these are the things that we've loaded. So imagine you have like 1,000 files. You've loaded 1,000 files within 2 seconds into the system. So this is what Salesforce called Data Import Wizard. It helps you to load data into the system. You have a limit of 50,000. It has to be a CSV. You have to prepare that data, okay? You have to prepare that data yourself. Salesforce does not prepare the data automatically for you. You have to prepare the data and you have to load it. That's how to load data into the system. Now, let's imagine we have this data in the system, but we want to update it. How do we update this data? The same approach which we've taken to import this data is the same approach we're going to use to import, update the data. But remember what I told you. In order to update any data, you need what is called the Salesforce ID. The Salesforce ID is a 15 or 18 character ID that is used to identify any record in the system. So anytime you create or insert a data into the system automatically gives a Salesforce ID. And once you get a Salesforce ID, you can now use that ID to update. Okay, so how would you typically get this if you've just updated, we've just inserted 1,000 records? My approach would be very simple. You want to go to reports, and what do you want to do? You want to generate a report of all the accounts in the system and you export it. If you're using data loader, it's much quicker, but typically what I would do is I will go to reports, okay? Because you cannot export, you cannot just export the list view. You have to generate a report and export that view. So I haven't taught you report yet, but this is how to do a simple report of all the accounts in the system. You go to reports and you click on a new report. And you select the object of interest based on what you are trying to get a report on. For instance, there's what they call report type. Report type in Salesforce helps you to limit the amount of objects that can appear for a selected report. So for instance, I want to create an account report. The selected or the ideal report type to select is the account report type, because report type is a type of report. It's a type of account report. Okay, so I'm selecting the account report. If I want to generate a report of contact and account, I'll select contact and account. If I want to generate a report of opportunities, I go to opportunities and I select all the possible, or I select the opportunity report I want to generate. These are what they call the standard report type in Salesforce. When we get to reports tomorrow, I will show you more about how to create a custom report type. But for now, because I want to show you how to update an existing record, and I want to get the IDs of those records without having to do things manually. Okay, with data loader, it's much easier. But for now, let's focus on doing it using the user interface. Okay, I select account, continue. Then this gives me the account in the system, but it appears that we have a filter. Again, you don't have to worry about what I'm doing right now because tomorrow I'm going to show you. However, for me to ensure that all the accounts in the system is showing up, I select all accounts in the filter. Okay, apply. Then I select all time records in the system, apply. So literally, I've removed the filter that is limiting the data that is visible to me right now. Okay, so it has given me all the account records in the system. Okay, this is all the account record in the system. But remember, we don't need all this stuff. The reason why we even want to get here is because of the ID. We needed a CSV file that would contain the ID of these records. We want to update these records. However, in order to update, instead of insert, we need to have what they call ID field. And we don't know this ID field. That's why we are going via this method to get the ID field based on reports. Okay, so when you're exporting report and data from a report, you want to get the account ID, right? This is the ID. Remember the ID I told you? For every account records in the system, you have what they call, let me go back to the account so you can see the account objects. This is account objects. This is the record. So RBC is 0018C. I go to my report. Where is RBC? RBC is 0018C. Okay, this is the reason why I'm doing the reports. And this is the ID, account ID that is giving me the ID. Okay, I run this report and I save this report, or I can export this report. Saving this report will save it within the Salesforce system. Okay, I can select the folder which I want to put this report. Again, we're not teaching reports right now. We're going to teach report tomorrow, but I'm just giving you a step-by-step process of how to get the ID of the records in the system so you can update them. Okay, you've been given a task to update this data you just inserted. That's what I'm going through right now. So now I save that report. I can go back to reports and you can see the new account report I just created. And I can export this report. Okay, I can export this report and I'm interested in what? I'm interested in a CSV file. If you don't select CSV file, you will not be able to import that data back into the system. So now that I have this, I open it. This is the data I'm interested in, okay? Now, I'm interested in these 4 data. I want to update them. So right now, we realize that we did not have a billing state for RBC, CIBC, BMO, and TD. We will now want to update that billing state, okay? So I'll say RBC is based in Toronto. I'll say CIBC is based in Etobicoke. And I'll say BMO is based in Montreal. And TD is based in Toronto, okay? So now I have updated this file. This is what you're going to be doing. This is becoming a Salesforce admin. Some people actually spend an entire day doing this because it looks like 4 records and you're thinking is an easy task. Trust me, I've seen 50,000 records and I've seen 100,000 records. I've seen 1 million records before, okay? So don't think this is going to be an easy task. This is going to be what you'll be doing as an admin. Updating records, importing data, exporting data. You need to know how to do it. So now I have updated this with Toronto, Etobicoke, Montreal, and Toronto. I have to do what? I have to save it, okay? I have to save it, and it is going into my folder, okay? Just for organization's sake, I'll just call it to be updated, okay? Again, it's better to just work in small caps so you don't shout. So now that we have that, I have updated that CSV file. I'm going to go back to my data import wizard. Data import wizard. And I am going to launch wizard again. Remember, if you want to do anything, you have to launch the wizard. Instead of adding new records, what do I want to do? I want to update an existing record. This is how you update an existing record. I want to match it by the name or the Salesforce ID. The Salesforce ID is what I have present in the CSV file. So let me open the CSV file from here so you can see what is in the CSV file. I like to work with Google Docs because it's online and it gives me dynamic, just give me, oh, how did I save it? I think it's opening with numbers, which is not what I'm expecting it to. Let me see how I save it just to be sure. I think I save it as a CSV file. So my expectation is it should open as a CSV file. So I just need to open it again and make sure that it is not a number. Please always work with CSV. Okay, I'll just put it .csv to .csv. Export. This is going to be your project. So if you don't understand what I'm doing right now, please don't leave this class without understanding how it works, okay? Because this is what you'll be doing at work. So now as you can see, I've updated these 4 records. Now I want to make sure that I install these records into the system using my Salesforce ID, knowing that there is Salesforce ID, which is the account ID present in my CSV. Then I click on CSV, I click on this, I click on that, then next. It automatically gives me, right? It's asking me, do I want, look at, if you don't map certain fields, the default will be based on what the system has in place. For instance, account owner. If I decide not to map this account owner, guess what? It will be the person uploading this data that would own the record, because every record is owned by someone, right? If you look at this record, it is owned by an account owner. So if you don't specify it and the system does not reject it, then by default, it should be allocated to the person that is doing the transaction, okay? Same as last modified date. Technically, you don't need to map last modified date. You know why? If you don't put it there, last modified date is the date which the record was modified, right? So right now would be the last modified date, right? So you don't need to map this. It's not necessary. By default, Salesforce will give you those values if they are not mapped. However, the account ID is very important, so we need to map it, and it's going to be ID. The ID, account Salesforce ID, okay? Map, okay? So now we did not map these 3, but we map other things. I click on next. Again, it gives you a summary of what you're doing. If you're okay with this, if you're happy, you click on start import and you click OK. Then you see a summary of what you've done. It says you've processed 27, and what happens is that it's going to update the ones that needs update, okay? So if you go to view results, open this up, you would see. So what have you seen? Created false, meaning that no new records were created. However, success true, meaning that it was successful and there were no errors in the system, okay? So if I go and refresh this, I want to go to the province, right? The province, which is somewhere there, I refresh, and I will see the province, which I have just updated, but the province is not displayed on the layout. Let's go to the accounts, and we bring the province to view, okay? Now, there, if you look at this right now, the province is not coming up, okay? The province is not coming up, which is something I will discuss with you shortly. So let me go to, first of all, I want to go to, let me see if there's any fields that is meant to display province, okay? Just to be sure. Okay, save. So now you will see that the province wasn't updated, but now let's look at what we selected when we are updating based on the data imports. I go to data imports, I go to launch wizard, I go to accounts, I go to update existing accounts, and if you're looking at this, we need to update existing account information. This is very important. If you don't select that, whatever changes you're making for the account will not work, okay? So we needed to have selected update existing account for this to work, okay? So let's try it again. Remember, the expectations are we should have province in the system. But when we did the update, we did not select the updates account, and that's why we did not have it. My expectation or my belief, my assumption. So let's validate that assumption and select account to be updated. The same thing we've done. We have to select ID. Okay, map and next. The same thing, import. Okay, ensure that no failure. Then go back and refresh this, okay? So we now have those changes in the system. So can you see the importance of selecting that field? Having that, some of you would do this stuff and you go nuts because you try to do something simple and it's not working. In Salesforce, you'll be presented with a lot of checkboxes and stuff like that. Always understand the rationale behind those checkboxes, and you can see the reason why Salesforce is asking you to select this, because you're uploading into two objects, and it's asking you, are you sure you want to update an existing account information? You have to select yes. So if you have a trigger, if you don't select this and you expect the trigger to run, it wouldn't run. So it's very important to select those boxes that ensures that you can update. So lastly, let's experiment, or let's say we want to do the last thing, which is update an existing record as well as insert a new record, which is what they call the upsert. Okay, you're upserting with data loader. So now I can just copy this. So now I wouldn't call this TD, I wouldn't call it Toronto, and I wouldn't give it ID. Do you know why I wouldn't give it ID? If there is no ID present, you are inserting a record. If there's an ID present, you are updating a record. Okay, so the system will see this last three as insert, and it's going to see all this as update. Okay, so for simplicity, I will call everything here Halifax. So you can see that update has happened as well as insert has happened. Okay, so I will call this what can I call it? Scotia Bank. Scotia Bank. So you know that we've created another TD GT Bank, and we call this we can call this Barclays. Okay, so we have all these banks, and we can call this one city is Scotia, this is Lagos, and this is London. Okay, so we have 3 records which we are inserting, and we have 4 records that we are updating, and every other thing we just leave blank, right? So it's gonna update this and it's gonna insert this. This is what they call the upsert. So again, I will just export this as a CSV file, and I will make sure that that is a CSV file. Then I will go and import. Okay, I want to upsert. Remember, I want to upsert. Okay. Okay, so I will go to data import wizard again. Just give me 1 minute, please. Copy. I'm trying to copy the CSV file. Paste. Okay, so I go to data import wizard. Let me refresh this so the screen doesn't look funny. I click on launch wizard, and I go to account again. I want to add new and update. Okay, make sure that this is selected, otherwise it wouldn't update. Make sure that the Salesforce ID is used to map the account ID, and make sure that you're selecting a CSV file, which is the new one I just created, and you go to next and make sure that you're mapping the account ID. Okay, make sure that it's the account ID, not the contact ID. It's very important. You're mapping the account ID because there are so many IDs there, right? If you're loading contacts, then you load in contact account ID. That's the relationship. But for the account ID, you have to be selecting ID, okay? The Salesforce ID. You click on map. You go to next. The same way, you start imports. And the expectations are 3 records will be inserted, 4 records will be updated, and the likes, okay? So I go to view results. I view the results, and let's see what happens. 3 records have been inserted, and the created is true, meaning that we've created 3 records and we've updated the other records without having to insert them. So I'm going to refresh this object, and you will see that Barclays London and the likes were inserted, okay? So this is Barclays London, GT Lagos, Scotiabank Scotia, and the others have been updated to Halifax. This is the complete process of using the data import wizard in the system. The first thing you need to know about data import wizard is you have to clean up the data. Salesforce will not clean up that data for you. It's your responsibility to clean up the data. Number 2, you have to import the data by selecting the file, which is a CSV file. And when you select the file, it's going to give the option to map the fields which you're interested in. And when you map the fields, you review your mapping, then you import. In addition to that, you can only import up to 50,000 records at a time. So if you have 50,001, you have to use the other tool called Data Loader. Number 2, you have limited options of standard objects you can load. You can only load accounts and contacts, leads, solutions, and campaign members. However, for the custom object, you can load all the custom objects that you have created, okay? And number 3, you want to map or you want to identify whatever ID you're using to connect if you are updating. If you're updating, you want to make sure that you're selecting either the Salesforce ID or some form of external ID in the system, okay? And lastly, you want to select a CSV file because Salesforce does not allow any other file to be updated, to be used within the Salesforce upload, okay? So I'm going to take a quick pause here to find out if you guys are getting the gist, you guys understand what's going on, you guys know why we're doing this, and if you guys have any questions. I'm going to call you according to how your hands are being raised, okay? So please raise up your hand so I can call you if you have any questions. So Tony, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to seriously appreciate you for giving me a voice in meetings these days at work. Thank you so much. I want to ask about the mapping. There's this, you uploaded the CSV file, and some of it were unmapped to those standard objects. I want to know how, if we have like thousands of objects that's unmapped, how do we correct that?
You don't unmap objects, you map fields, okay? Fields. So the most important thing is you have to map the fields that is available. If you don't map them, they wouldn't be inserted into the system.
Okay, because there's this one that you just finished doing, that example that you just showed us, and some of it were under the Salesforce objects. There was some that were not mapped.
Yeah, I just told you if it's not mapped, it will not be created. The record will not be created in the system.
Oh, it will not be created in the system.
Not be created. Yes, you have to map it. That's the benefit of the data import. It gives you a visual representation of what's going on. You make sure that you map those fields. If you don't map all these fields, all the data that is in the CSV file under this field will not be inserted into the system.
Oh, okay then. So that's when you go back and do the needful so that it will be mapped, it will be correctly mapped in the system.
Yeah. Ideally, all these columns needs to represent the field API name. Okay, the field API name For instance, for the account, you need to make sure that the API name are matching those fields. So you don't even need to stress yourself over mapping because they will be automatically mapped. Okay? But if it doesn't match the API name, maybe you call this one account number. Right now, it's account number in Salesforce, but in your CSV file, it's called client number. So if it's called client number in your CSV file, and in Salesforce, it's called account number, you have to manually map client number as account number. However, if it's called account number, Salesforce will intuitively map it, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. So
you
it's
understand?
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's all.
No worries. Abby, please unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, thank you, Babatope. So I just have a quick question. So you said if there's no ID present, that means we're starting a record. And you also mentioned if you have an ID present, that means we are updating, or did you say upsetting? Or I just want to be sure.
If you have ID present, you are upsetting the record. If you have ID present, you are updating the record. If you don't have ID present, you are inserting the record. If you have mixture of ID like this, and some do not have ID, then you are upsetting, meaning that all this will be updated and these three will be inserted. Okay?
Okay, thank you. And the second question I have is just what I observed. So I noticed when you wanted to update, you after downloading, you had to manually type in those Toronto, the provinces. So my question is, since they were not a lot, or actually they are a lot, is it not something we can manually do? Because it's just like you manually did it when you're updating, like you manually typed in those provinces. So it's really make no difference. Like if you are doing it on the actual, say for example, on accounts and you're just editing and putting it. So I just want you to elaborate on the updating part for me. I really did not get, I don't know if you understand what I mean.
So this is what happens, right? If you have large amount of record, that's when you do all this. If you have 2 records or 3 records, you don't need to be doing it using data imports. Okay? You don't need to use data import to do this. If you have large amount of data, you can spend the whole day preparing that data. The whole day is a full-time job. This is what they call becoming a Salesforce administrator. This is what they do at work. They'll just give you legacy data. They'll say, clean up this data and import it into Salesforce. That could be your a week's job. Do you get what I mean? So now you have to spend your time. You now start spending, okay, what city is Jim Point is? Is it sure? Are you sure it's California? Then you say, okay, it's California. After everything has been done using the CSV, then you now go to Salesforce. In fact, your job in Salesforce is 2 minutes. As you can see, I usually tell you guys, once you get the Salesforce job, your life becomes easier. The problem will pass your certification and get the job. But if you know how to use, if you have common sense, you can survive the Salesforce admin for the next 5 years because there's nothing there in Salesforce admin. You just need to know what to do. I want to make sure that RBC city is Halifax. Then I put it there. After everything has been completed, that's when you now go to data import wizard to go and upload into the system. But do not upload, because this is where the tricky part is. Do not upload into the system until you have cleaned up the data, because once you upload the data into the system and it's the wrong data, that's when the problem comes in. How do you identify the data you just uploaded and the like? Obviously, you can use reports to generate that. But if you don't know how to use reports to generate the data, then you get lost. Okay? So please always clean up the data before you start inserting data. Okay? Jane, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, Babatope. I have a quick question. I know you talked about cleaning up the data before you upload it, but we know we're in an imperfect world and people make mistakes. So say, for example, you put in a wrong data type, maybe for a record type that needs a yes or no, you put in a different thing entirely, and then you upload it. Does it cause an error, and how do you go about fixing it? Like if there's an error that pops up, I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to get at with this question.
If you have cleaned up the data right, you're not expected to see an error. However, if you have an error, this is where you get to see it. You will see the number of successful data processed and number of failed data. So Salesforce will not stop you from importing bad data. It's going to import it, but if it fails, it's going to tell you this data failed and the reason why it failed. Okay? You will see the reason that once you get into data loader, you see it more clearly how these files have been generated. The reason why it failed will be described there. It's now up to you to go and fix that. So you can see all the records that failed, then look for those records and fix those records. However, Salesforce will not, unless you haven't mapped the right field. For instance, if you want to update a record and you haven't provided the ID, Salesforce will say, okay, hold on. You want to update, right? And you're not giving him ID. What do you want me to do? That's an error. It's going to stop you from inserting that record from updating that record, because you said you want to update and you're not given the required fields for update. However, in terms of failure in the data itself, it's not going to stop you. It's going to let you, it's garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put in is whatever you get out of the system. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Babs Ken, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, family. Thank you again, Babatope. My question, I don't know if we will take that later in the class, or if it's something that can be addressed now, is a question about dupes or duplicates, right? Say it's already, there's the havoc is caused, there's the messed up data in the system. How, as an administrator, how do I go about even figuring exactly how to fix that?
Yeah, so like I said, chances are you would make, let me just mute it for a minute. Chances are you will make mistakes and you want to kind of like figure out things. This is where your knowledge of problem solving comes into place. How do you, if you were to be on the job right now, even if it's not Salesforce related job, you have just inserted records and it has a timestamp. How would you be able to retrieve those records? There are so many ways you can do that. You can go to all the records and look the created dates and only display the records that were created at that time. Can you see? The ones that were created at certain times are the ones I just worked on. I just go to filter and I go to add filter and I go to created dates. And I say, I want all records greater than, okay, the created dates which is given here. Can you see? I want all records greater than this. No, not even greater. I'll just say, just give me 1 minute. I want to make sure that I want all records greater than this, okay? Then you just go and create a filter and say, I want all records that is greater than certain dates. And if you're extremely sure about certain value or certain fields that you've just created, I want all data that is greater than this date, right? Then you say done and you save, okay? And it's going to give you all the data you just inserted. Can you see? These are all the data I just inserted. Then I don't know whatever I want to do with this, but obviously this doesn't give me opportunity to export. But if you have those ideas, you can manually change them if they are not much. However, if it is much, go to report and generate that data. Report is the only way you can generate a data that you can export out of the system. Okay, you can do this through report or you can do this through data loader, which I'm going to go into next. So all accounts apply, but created date again, you specify the dates that you created it. Okay, you specify the date that you created it. If you want other things, you can specify it as well. Last activity, you can specify those stuff. These are the kind of things that you can easily use to export that data immediately. Alternatively, you use data loader, which I'm going to go next. Okay, so you just have to be a problem solver to understand what impact of the changes you made in the system and how to address it quickly before the management found out that you made a mistake. Okay, so do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I do. The flip side of, I think it's the same question, but the flip side is that you walk into the job and they throw it at you and say, hey, we have this thing. We know that there are a lot of dupes here. Well, they have a lot of messed up things there. What do I do in this case? In this case, I did not create it and there's no way to timestamp and say, okay, here's where it is. What would be the first set of things that I would do?
You did not create it.
So you did not create it.
If you did not create it, it depends on what you're trying to solve, right? It has tell me a use case of the problem you're facing, and I'll tell you how I will approach it. But everyone can have different ways of approaching it. You tell me what the problem is, and let me solve it for you. Unmute yourself and speak.
Okay. So, like I said, it's very, very, very vague, right? I'm just trying to see if it does help also to understand exactly the issues that we can face. It's more of, okay, we know we have bad data in here. You hear that comment all the time inside corporate Western world corporate environment, right? They can sometimes pinpoint you to tell you that indeed we think this is where the bad data sets are. Sometimes it might be like in an organization where they have a lot of salespeople who are trying to game the system and they are creating duplicate accounts, right? Or duplicate records, right? So now they're saying you are the Salesforce guy. Can you help us figure out how to clean up all of this and probably put some checks in there to make sure that indeed we don't create a flag in a way or something, right?
Okay. First of all, in terms of data validation, data quality, we're going to do that tomorrow. Okay. So we are going to see measures which we have in place to identify duplicates in an object and how to prevent duplicates. However, to answer your question, I would just say I need criteria. What criteria do you have in the system that would help me to understand if this is a bad data or not? I cannot just make an assumption because this one has Florida as FL and this one has Scotia as Scotia, then this is a bad data. No, that's an assumption. I need the business to tell me that this is a bad data or this criteria is a bad data or data inserted at so date and time is a bad data, right? Bad data, right? So I need those criteria. That criteria would now help me to figure out, to filter out those data. And because I know how to use data loader, I can even write a SQL that would help me filter. And Salesforce also have what they call the plugin. Okay, some plugins are there that can help you write SQL statements with all these objects. So you write queries as if you are writing SQL queries. When you're looking for likes, when you're looking for contain certain parameters, then you can filter them. So then again, these are for advanced Salesforce users. However, the business must provide you with criteria matching bad data, or maybe any data that doesn't have type is a bad data, or any data that doesn't have rating is a bad data. You have to need a criteria before you start saying this is a bad data or not. Okay, so I'll move on to AA. AA, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Okay, good evening, Babatope. My question is this. When you were explaining data import wizard, you said there are certain standard objects that cannot be that cannot import to. And then yeah, so I'm thinking, is it possible to clone standard objects, so that to make it custom object, and then so that you can be able to use the data import wizard for those objects, for those particular objects, like they are not listed here.
The process of cloning is even longer than data import data loader. So if you cannot use the data import to load standard object, just go to data loader. It's almost the same process. So why would you want to clone the object? Like literally cloning a standard object is practically not possible because standard object might have other things. They might have other things associated to them. Like as you can see in cases, we have case assignment through case this thing, case that. Your cloning doesn't carry on with those functionalities. And if it's just data you want, why not just use the right tool for the right operation? You have to think as a problem solver, not finding an easy way out, but solving things based on best practice. Okay? Afia, please.
Hi, Babatope. I have a few questions actually. The first one is when you were, you said select fields. Are you able to, let's say you need all the fields in the object. Are you able to do all of it at once? Because I see you doing just picking specific ones. What if you need all the fields in the object? Is that possible?
So I gave you an example of using reports to get an existing data in the system, right? There's also data loader, which I'm going to show you shortly, but you can get all fields if you're okay getting them. You have to manually be typing them out and be selecting them. You can do that. You can drag these fields and drag them into this page, right? You can literally do anything you want, okay? But look at all the fields here. With data loader, it's just a simple click and you can get all the fields in the account object. That's why I don't use reporting to get fields. I use data loader to get fields. So once you get comfortable with data loader, it becomes easier for you to solve your problem. Okay?
Okay, just one more question. Can you please go over the insert and the absert? I don't think I have the word right.
So when you are entering a new data into the system, you are inserting a record. Inserting means you are putting in data into the system. Okay. When you have an ID present in your CSV file, you are updating record, meaning that you are updating an existing record in the system. And when you have a mixture of ID present, just like this, and you have no ID present, then this is called upsert. Upsert is when you have the possibility of inserting a record as well as updating an existing record. Okay?
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Felix, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, thank you. I think you already mentioned about the error of duplicate and missing records. But then if you, like somebody was asking a few moments ago, if you have, this data submitted to you at the new Salesforce admin, and they say in the final report, some details were missing that were already available in the CSV file. So how do we get that imputed into it? I think you mentioned that, but tomorrow you said you were going to do that in details. Then I want to see again, please, how you got to checking the records of your upload. You clicked on something to check the final records of it, so that we can also check before we essentially submit to you.
Yes, like I said, you need to have a criteria. If you don't have a criteria, you cannot check. So you need to, like now, if I load data into the system right now, and I want to find out the data I just inserted because I realized, oh, I've made a mistake. Guess what? The last modified date of this data is this. The only one that has a recent modified date is this. So I'm just going to say, give me all data where last modified date is this. Can you see? I've eliminated all this data and I've just focused on the data I just inserted. Then I can just delete this data. I can just delete it because I can start all over again. But I've given the system a criteria that helps me to eliminate all this data so they would not be included in my query. Okay? This is again becoming a Salesforce administrator. So it's no longer what I should teach you, is more of how would you solve a problem that they've given you at work? Oh, I have just inserted data wrongly. How do I identify that data? Because I wouldn't be there when you're given this work. And it might not be a last modified date you're going to use. Maybe you will use something else that can easily help you filter that data. But it's important to know that you're only filtering the data you have just inserted, or you're only filtering the data that is relevant to the mistake you're trying to catch. Okay? So it's very important. Nonso, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Babatope, for the lecture. My question is, I've been cutting in and out, so there's a bit of gap. My question is, so from the questions you've been answering, I understood that when you're updating a record, you have to kind of like generate the report, which is where you get the account ID from. And for you to get the account ID, you kind of like have to filter the report to pull out that field. I just wanted to be sure that that was the process for that. I wanted to get it clear.
So the filter was as a result of the fact that by default, when you're creating a new report, it gives you my account. It doesn't give you all the accounts in the system. Okay. So I just remove all the filters that is limiting all the accounts from displaying. As you can see, if I remove all the filter here, created date is all time, which obviously opens up the account. Can you see all time? Filter is removed. Filter limits the record. Filter limits the display of the records that is in the system. But if you decide to get all the records, then you remove the filter, right? So it's not like you have to go to filter. No, it's just because I don't want to be limited in terms of the records that is being shown. I want to see all the records. So I remove all the filter. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, this is one of the ways which you can do it. There's another way which I'm going to show you shortly, but this is one of the ways that is user interface driven. Okay. I will show you how to do that using data loader shortly. Okay.
Okay. My other question is, like I said, I got caught out a bit. So I just wanted to clearly understand if you could just run through the mapping process briefly.
So when you have a data, right, you decide, okay, I want to load an account data. You select a new record. Okay, this is a new record, or you can select update record depending on what you decide to do. Then you select the CSV. I want to load XYZ CSV, which we process, okay? Then you go to next, which is the mapping phase. The mapping maps the header of this CSV. It maps it with the fields in your Salesforce. So the fields in your Salesforce is the object manager that gives you, or the account objects, okay? That gives you these fields. These are the fields of the account, right? All the stuff are the fields. You need to make sure that they are mapped correctly. You need to make sure that they are mapped correctly. So data would enter those fields. If you don't map them correctly, data will not enter those fields, okay? You can get the field just by viewing the details, or you can go to setup and you go to the account objects, okay? Fields and relationship, then you get the fields name. Okay, this is what you want to make sure that the CSV file is mapping to. And you do it manually using the mapping. Once you map it, then you go to next and you upload that data. Okay?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Olalekan, please. After Olalekan, we'll continue with the lecture. Olalekan, please.
All right, good evening, Babatope. This is a comment and also a question. For those of us that have been asking about if we upload data without cleaning up the data and we mess up stuff, I think one thing I've seen in the past is, as part of my experience, is when you're about to, especially when you're in a corporate organization, when you are going to do data updates, it's usually best to do a backup of the specific object or database that you are trying to update first, so that you have a copy of the data before you make any of these changes, so that you have something to fall back on if something happens. But I know that I think Salesforce has some restrictions on how many times you can do backups. So my question is, can we use the report to export data for the fields, for those objects in the place of doing a backup?
So yeah, the report can be used as a tool to export. There is also what they call data exports, exporting data in Salesforce, and this can help you export all your data, which obviously I was going to go into, but again, since you're asking it, I might as well just tell you. You can export data now, like literally export any object data, and you're going to get all the data in that object. Okay, this is an example of how to back up your data instantaneously, or you can schedule an export. Okay, when you schedule an export, you have the start date and the end date. You can schedule once a month, you can schedule every week, you can schedule every week or once a month, but you cannot schedule daily. Okay, you have to either do it now, which is the daily backup, or you schedule for a weekly backup and a monthly backup. Okay, so you have that options in Salesforce. It gives you a snapshot of the data in the objects. Okay, so that's the way you do that if you're working in a professional environment. Okay, let's move on right now. We've spent a lot of time discussing about data import wizard, and the next one is data loader. Please, if you are going to go further with me, you need to know how to use data loader. Your project requires you to understand data loader. If you don't understand data loader, you cannot work as a Salesforce admin. Forget it. Because only an admin can use data loader. Okay? And if you cannot if you cannot use data loader, it means that you're not ready to work as a Salesforce admin. So please pay attention to this. Now, what is data loader? Like I said earlier, data loader is a client-side application that helps you to load data in the system. Why do we need data loader? Why can't we just be using data import wizard? We need data loader because we want to load large volume of data. Okay, we want to load a lot of records in the system, 5 million records. You cannot do that with data import wizard because data import wizard has limitations. In addition to that, if you look at data import wizard, the only thing you can do with data import wizard is you can update, you can insert, you can update, and you can upsert. Okay, so those are the three things you can do with data import wizard. However, for data loader, you can do more than just these three things. So let me quickly open the data loader in my system. So I'll assume that you guys have successfully installed data loader on your system. When you install data loader on your system, I'm using a Mac. This is what I get. Okay, then I click on that. I will get this. This is a Salesforce data loader, and the data loader, as you can see, with data import, I can add new, update, and upsert. However, with data loader, I can do what? Insert, which is present in data import, update, which is also present in data import wizard, upsert, which is also present in data import wizard. However, I have delete, hard delete, export, and export all. What is delete? Obviously, you know what delete is. When you delete record, you delete it from the system. What do you need to delete a record from the system? You just need the ID. Again, before you can delete a record from the system, you need the ID. So if I want to delete these 3 records I created, or these 4 records I created from the system, I would need the ID only. So I don't necessarily have to have all the details. Okay, if I want to delete this because I just made a mistake, I can either get the report, I can get the reports, get the ID, and just delete it. So I don't have to delete it manually. Okay, I don't have to delete it manually. All I just need is the ID. Okay, in addition to that, I can add delete. What is add delete? As you can see, add delete is not enabled by default, even for system admin. The reason why add delete is not enabled for system admin is because Salesforce discourages us from deleting records using the data loader. Why? Because if you delete record, if you add delete record using data loader, that's it. That's the end of it. You cannot retrieve it. However, if you delete records, you have the opportunity of retrieving that records. In Salesforce, there's what they call the recycle bin. The recycle bin is where all your records go to. Anytime you delete a record, you would find them in your recycle bin, okay? Anytime you delete a record, it will go into your recycle bin. So let's try to see what happens when we delete a record in the account object. I expect it to go to the recycle bin, so I'm just gonna delete this record, okay? I'll go to this. I don't know if I have a delete. Okay, it asks you if you want to delete. You said yes. And I go to the org recycle bin. And you will see the deleted record. If you deleted a bunch of records, this is where it's going to go to. Okay, you have limited storage in your recycle bin. Just like when you have computer, you have a recycle bin. You have a limited storage. So all these records can come here. However, the most recent one will override the older ones, meaning that if you delete something 2 weeks ago and you delete something today, the recent one will be the ones deleted today, and 2 weeks ago will be deleted permanently if the recycle bin is filled up. Okay, so this is where you go if you've made a mistake, terrible mistake in the system. Let's say you've done something really bad. This is where you go to do what? You can restore that data. So you can restore by checking the data and clicking on restore, or you can click on individual data and restore the data. In addition to that, if you decide to empty the recycle bin, all you just need to do is empty the recycle bin and everything here will be deleted permanently. So as you can see, the reason why you don't have add delete enabled is because add delete means it doesn't go to the recycle bin. It's deleted completely from the system. If you're an admin and you still want to have this, you need to go to the permission set and grant add delete for the admin profile. Once you grant add delete for the permission for the admin profile, then the admin will be able to delete this add delete using data loader. In addition to that, export. I've shown you how to get the record ID. And one of the questions was, do you have to get all this record? How do you get all these fields and everything? As you can see, the only reason why we needed the ID was because we needed to update, and we needed the ID in order to update. However, with data loader, if I wanted to, if I needed to update a record, I would first of all go to export, and I will export the record. Exporting the record will give you the opportunity to export the record ID, okay? Once you export the record ID, then you can work with the record. So for now, in order for me to export, I need to log in. In order for me to carry out any transaction using the data loader, I need to log in regardless. So it's not just export, but in order for me to do anything within the data loader, I need to log in. So let's say, for instance, I want to carry out the same transaction like I did the last time. I want to, instead of me generating a report to give me the ID, I just need to export. In order for me to export, I need to log in, but you don't select, give me 1 minute. Because in a professional environment, you're going to have production and sandbox. Okay, you're going to have production and sandbox. So you have to select what environment you want to export the data from, or you want to insert the data into. Because when you're working as a professional, you don't work directly in production. So whatever you want to do, the first thing you do is you do it in the sandbox. Sandbox is like your hands-on org in an enterprise environment. So what do I mean by that? Hands-on org is when you're not working with any organization, you're not working with any business, you're just by yourself, you're learning Salesforce. That's hands-on org, which we're currently using right now. However, sandbox is when you are working for an organization and you want to play around, you want to test things before you do it in production, then you call that environment sandbox, okay? So understand the difference between a sandbox and a production org. Production org is where the real thing happens. Sandbox is where you play around, okay? So now I need to log in. In order to log in, I will go to my settings to grab my username. Okay, I put my username here. And I hope I still remember my password. Okay, I don't think I remember my password. Just give me 1 minute. Let me see if I can retrieve my password. Okay, if I cannot retrieve my password, all I just need to do is reset my password so I can retrieve it, okay? Because I don't remember all this stuff. I go to user. Remember, this is the basic stuff that we did. Go to user, go to the profile of interest, which is this. And I make sure that this guy is a system admin, because you can only, okay, you can only work with a system admin, okay? So go to users, click on that guy and click on reset password, okay? So right now, my password will reset, and I'm going through the reset process because this is a different screen. You might not see the password reset, but I'm going to reset my password right now, and I'll be able to log into my data loader, okay? So just give me 1 minute. Let me, I'm resetting my password. Okay, so back to my screen, and I type in my new password. Okay, now it's asking me that this guy wants to use data loader, and do I want to allow it to access this account? And I said, yes, I would like it to access this account. So now it says login successfully. Remember, you have to know what environment you're working in. Production is very delicate, but then again, because this is a playground, we don't really care. But in your work environment, start with sandbox, do whatever you want to do within the sandbox before you go to production. You go to Nest. So now I want to do what? I want to export. Remember, when I was working in the front end, what I did was I did reports in order to get my IDs. But when I'm working with data loader, I just select the objects. As you can see, I can work with any object of my interest, of my chosen. I have all the objects in Salesforce. As you can see, there's so many of them, but you don't have to check this box. It just gives you the basic one that you can work with. But if you want to see everything, you click on that box and it's going to give you all the objects in the system. That's why the data loader is very powerful. Okay, so now I click on the accounts and I click on browse just to store it somewhere, and I'll just put it into my desktop, and I'll say account extract. Okay, and I can just put it in one of my folders so I don't misplace it. So I have that account extract.csv. Remember, everything you do must be CSV. So now that I have the extract of my account, next, someone mentioned that, how do you do the fields? Like I told you, you have options. You can select all fields and everything you have in the account object would appear. Alternatively, if you don't want to select all the fields, you can just check the fields of interest and they would appear automatically. Okay, as you can see, that's out. And if you have any condition where today's date, you can put it there. Where's billing city equals Lagos. So you are literally putting a where clause, just like you have in SQL. This is the user interface, but if you know how to write SQL, you can just write the SQL here. As you can see, data loader gives you that flexibility to run what they call the SOQL. That's the equivalent of SQL in Salesforce. If you're a developer, you're expected to know what SOQL is. But as an admin, you don't need to worry about it because everything is intuitive. You just need to click, 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 and it gives you everything you need. So I click on finish, I click on yes, and it gives me everything I am doing. So right now, operation has fully completed. There was 0 successful, which obviously it's not right. So let's click on OK, and let's click on export again on the account objects. I want to do the account extract, save, replace, that's fine. Then I go to Nest. Then I select all the fields of interest. I click on finish. Yes, okay. And it gives you all the extracts, okay? 29 successful extraction and 0 errors. This is very important. If you're working with data loader, always see the outcome of your operation. The outcome of the operation tells you what has just happened. Right now, it says I have successfully exported 29 records. View the extraction, and you see that it has successfully exported all the account records in the system. How do you know that it has successfully exported all the accounts? Go to your account record and see the number of accounts you have in the system, all accounts, and you see that they are 29, okay? So if you can even generate a report to see the number of accounts you have in the system. So now that you've exported that out, you can now open up that export CSV file, okay? You can open up the CSV file and you will select the extract file, which is the same as the report. However, this gives you all the fields. This is how you get all the data in the system. So many ways to get data. You can do schedule export to get the data. You can do reports to get the data. You can use exports in the data loader to get the data, okay? So now you can see the data is here and you can see the ID, okay? One thing you want to see is the ID, okay? This is the ID and this is the area of interest if you want to update the data. Then you can now update the data. If you want to delete all the data, all you just need is the ID. So let's imagine I want to delete this data from the system, okay? This data from the system, I'm going to copy this data, this 4 data, insert a new record. I will call this ID. I don't even need to give anything else. I just want to delete this record, okay? So how do I verify that this record exists in the system? I go to the accounts, open any record, and I replace this record with the ID, okay? So now I know that this record exists in the system. This is RBC. Similarly, I go to this record, I copy the ID, and I put it here to check that this record exists in the system. This record is CIBC. Then I go to this record again, the last one. I place it here and I replace this ID just to verify that this record exists in the system. And as you can see, it's steady. Right now, I know that I have 3-4 records in the system. I want to delete. I'll just call it accounts to be deleted, okay? .csv. Make sure that anything you're doing with Salesforce is in CSV file. So I export or I download as a CSV file. Then I go to my data loader again. I click on delete. Remember, the only thing I put here is the ID. If I want to delete a record, the only thing I need is the ID, okay? I select the object of interest. This is the object of interest, the account object. I browse and I select accounts to be deleted. Where did I put it? Let me look for where I put it. Let me bring it to view. So just give me 1 minute. I go to my download, copy, go to my folder. Okay. This is my account to be deleted. Then I go to next and it's telling me operation. Your operation will contain 4 records. Are you sure? Good. Then now, you know, when you're doing data imports, you have to manually map the fields to wherever they are coming from in the CSV. With data loader, it is somewhat different. You have to either create or edit a mapping file, or you can upload an existing mapping file. So before you can upload, you need to have created, right? So let's create for now. And how do you create? When you click on create, it's going to give you this option. This is your CSV. This is the system. It's telling you that this, you can map with this, okay? That's how you map. You drag it, okay? If you don't want that, you can click on auto map. Auto match will automatically map based on the ID. It's very intuitive. It's going to give you the mapping based on whatever ID is present. So always try to use the right header for your CSV so you don't stress yourself. If you don't use the right header, you will have to be doing things manually, okay? So use the right header so you don't stress yourself. Auto match will automatically map it for you if you have the right header in place. But if you don't have the right header in place, you have to manually drag, just like the way I just dragged this. You have to manually drag them. When we work on updates using data loader, you will see how that works in when we have multiple fields, okay? So now you have done that. You have the option of clicking OK. When you click OK, the process will continue. But if you know that you're going to be doing this very often, the first thing you want to do is you want to save it. You can save it as accounts mapping. Okay, so you don't have to do this all the time. The mapping file is called SDL, meaning that anytime you have an account that needs to be mapped based on the fields, you will just import that. I'll show you how to import it. You click on choose an existing map and you select that, okay? That's how you import an existing map. But before you can import, you need to have created it in the past, okay? So now we go to next and we click on finish. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to delete? Do you want to proceed? You click on yes, and it's going to tell you, it's going to go to your recycle bin and the likes. You say, are you sure? Yes. And it's going to tell you what has been deleted, okay? As you can see, 4 successes and 0 errors, meaning that 4 records have been deleted. And you can view your success and you can see it's deleted, okay? It gives you the ID number and it's been deleted. And you can see that there are no errors while the operation took place. You click OK, and that's it. That's how to delete a record. Now that we've deleted the record, let's refresh this page because this ID is one of the records we deleted. Let's refresh this page. You see that Salesforce would not be able to find that ID or record because it has been deleted, okay? So now we do not have the record, and if you go back to all your records, all those TD, CIBC, and the likes have been deleted. This is how you delete a record, and this is how you export a record. As you can see, you can export all the fields in the system, and you can export all. So the difference between export is going to export all the records you have in this object right now. But export all, we export all the records, including the records of the objects in the recycle bin. As you can see, export all will give you all the records in the entire system. Export will give you all the records that are not deleted in the object. So understand the difference between export and export all. Also understand the difference between delete and hard delete. Understand the difference between update and upsert, and know that data loader can do more than just insert, update, upsert. There is one more thing that you need to know in data loader, and that's the use of an external ID. When you have a record like this, such as account record, okay? When you have a record such as an account record, if you go to the related, you will see that the account record has what they call contacts, opportunities, cases, and the likes. So if you want to insert or if you want to update a record that has an external ID, you will be required to use what they call the external ID field. And the external ID field will be associated to the relationship. So for instance, you have this account, you have this opportunities for an account, okay? So let's go, you have the opportunity for an account. So if you want to load opportunity record and you want it to be associated to the account record, the first thing you need to do is you need to load the account record, because how can you load an opportunity record that has no parent called account? So when you're loading the account record, let's say you have a system that needs to be identified based on the existing record. For instance, you have an account, and inside the account, you have opportunities. If you want to load opportunities that has an associating record of account, the first thing you need to do is load the account. Then you load the opportunities, okay? So you cannot load the opportunities first and load the accounts later. It doesn't work that way, because you will not be able to identify the account with the opportunities. And how can you associate this with this? You need to use what they call the external ID. So if you go to the objects and you have a field and relationship, if you click new and you have a test field, you go to next, there is what they call the external ID. This external ID is very important. The reason why it's very important is because it is a unique ID in the system. It helps you associate dependencies. It helps you associate legacy IDs. It helps you associate anything that needs to be used for other objects. So for instance, if you have legacy record coming into the system, if you have legacy records coming into the system, you don't give that legacy record the account ID, because ID is something Salesforce creates. So if you have a legacy system that has a primary key, you do not replace it with the Salesforce ID. Salesforce ID is something that Salesforce creates. So you will store that ID in what they call an external ID. The external ID is just for you to keep that ID. So if you want to match that ID with other objects in the system, then you can easily make reference to it. As you can see, if you're upserting, or if you're upserting, look at this. If you're upserting into the account objects, okay, let's just say we have this account data, for instance, next, okay. So this is there are no external ID. If there were external ID, you will see that external ID pop up here. So that external ID will now be the ID of the legacy system you're trying to preserve. If you don't preserve that ID, you will not be able to use it for relationship. Okay, so this ID is very important. Whenever you have a legacy system coming into the system, always preserve that primary key of that legacy system using the external ID, because it will be useful for you to connect two systems, two objects together in future. Okay, so now going back to a typical update that has multiple fields. I want to show you how the mapping works. Okay, so it has multiple fields. So now we don't have an existing mapping that has account ID, account name, type, last activity, and the likes. Okay, I need to create one. I click on create. As you can see, I have two options. The first option is to start dragging billing state and province. Okay, I'm looking for billing states. Okay, it doesn't exist, right? In a natural fact, none of this exists. Okay, I have to look for it. Sorry, billing state and province. I will drag it. Can you see how strenuous this process could be, right? Because you are trying to map things together. This account ID, it needs to map the account ID, right? This is how you would do it. But however, if you use auto match fields, it will automatically match based on the look and feel, like the look alike. If you now feel like account name is not the same thing as name, then you can take it off. If you feel like type is not the same thing as type, you can take it off. But the auto match is very useful. It gives you easy way of mapping things. Then you have to review the mapping yourself. However, auto match saves you the stress of having to drag things. As long as you've matched the name and the field together, you'll be able to auto map easily. And if you've made any mistake that you cannot quickly undo, just clear and you start again. Okay, so that's how to map when you have a lot of fields. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to open the floor again for questions and answer. Please drop your hands if you already asked a question. Unless you want to ask a new question, then I'll call you. Please raise your hand up and I'll call you according to how your hands are being raised up. If you have a new question, please raise your hand. If you don't have any question, please drop your hand so I can only call those that are interested in asking questions. So Gaffer, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Babatope, for always giving us a very brilliant presentation. My question is this. You can see that we can generate reports, but is there any way, maybe we have not gotten there, to give us a kind of a dashboard that will give us a pictorial representation of our data? Probably you can get like pie charts, bar charts, histograms, different data modeling that will make it more presentable. Is there any way we can do that on Salesforce?
Yeah, we can do that. And that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. We're going to be doing data validation, data duplicates, and we're going to be doing dashboard and report, how to create reports and how to create dashboard tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Babs, Ken, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Thank you again, brother. I know this might also not be, or might be beyond the purview. What are your take on MuleSoft, for example, as a data integration software? I know some of the capabilities are external. They call it kind of middleware. Is that part of what is covered in this, or is something that obviously is outside the purview of what we have?
For MuleSoft, right?
Yes.
So MuleSoft is a middleware that helps you connect data using like APIs, okay? So when you see, for instance, you have opportunities, and let's say you have a website for an e-commerce website, and you want to stream data from an external system into Salesforce without necessarily having to go through the import, export, and the likes. You want to do it programmatically. MuleSoft is a gateway that transforms that data into XML and vice versa. So I can send data outside of Salesforce using that gateway. It is a message broker that translates this data in an XML format that an external system can understand. And if an external system is coming in to Salesforce, MuleSoft can also translate that data from an external system into a format which Salesforce can understand. So MuleSoft is just like, okay, what does that opportunity name means for the external system? MuleSoft will give you the data mapping. What does this means when it's coming to Salesforce? MuleSoft will be the middleware, the gateway that translates and communicates what this means for an external system or for Salesforce. So as a Salesforce admin, obviously, that's entirely out of scope. Even for a developer, that's out of scope. However, if you're into architecture, if you're into design, then those are the kind of things you will want to be knowledgeable about, because it will be required for your knowledge and for your consulting skills and implementation when you have bigger projects. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Ebube, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi. I just wanted to go over how to use the external ID to import data into Salesforce, please. That place wasn't really clear for me. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just give you an example. I'm going to go to setup and I'm going to create an external ID on the account object. So I'm going to say new test, okay? And I'm going to say external ID. That's very important. Then I'll say account external ID, okay? Length is 50 or 70, whatever it is. I click on next and I click on next and I save. So now an account has what they call account external ID. When you insert records into the system from a legacy system, the account external ID would now be the primary key of that legacy system. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I have these records that is going into the system, this record, okay? And I'm going to call it, obviously I deleted this record now. So, and I'm going to say account external, no. This is the ID, okay? This is the ID. This data is coming from a legacy system. So this ID does not mean anything to Salesforce. This ID does not mean anything to Salesforce. So you don't store it in an ID field for Salesforce. You store it in an external ID just for the connection in case someone else is using this ID in the system, which I'm going to give you an example right now. Account to load, CSV, okay? Let me drop that into my folder. Okay, account to load. So now we have this, okay? I'm going to restart my data loader because once you make changes to the objects, you have to restart your data loader for the changes to kick in. So I'm going to insert login. I need to get my username. I go to settings. And my password. Allow. Then I go next, account. Okay, this is the account to load, which I just created, right? Let me confirm that again. Account to load. Okay, no, that's not the account to load I just created. Let me look for the account to load I just created because the timestamp doesn't match. Okay. Copy. This is account to load, okay? Look at the timestamp. Actually, this is the one I had before. Account to load, okay? Next. Okay, for record, which is fine. Auto map, which is fine. But the ID, okay, is the account external ID, meaning that I am storing the account, the ID, okay, this ID, because Salesforce ID is different from this ID. I have to store this ID as an account external ID for future purpose, which I'm going to show you right now, the reason why I'm doing that. Okay, but remember, account external ID is this ID is going into account external ID, not ID for Salesforce. Okay, okay, next, finish, yes. For record successfully, go back to the accounts object. The records which I created is now there, right? Which is perfect, okay? But the account external ID is this. It is different from the ID Salesforce gave us. This is the ID of this record in Salesforce. This is the ID of this record in that legacy system, not Salesforce. Only the legacy system understands this ID. So what's the usefulness of this ID? Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to do this? I need to do this because what if there are some records that I'm bringing in from that legacy ID, legacy system, that needs to be associated to another record in Salesforce? For instance, contacts. You know that you have an account, and whenever you go to an account, you have what they call contacts. So let's say we're also bringing contacts of this legacy account. How do you associate them? Because this new ID, that means you have to constantly look for this ID and now load all the contacts mapping this ID. But that's long. Imagine having to load 1 million records and be looking for ID for all the accounts for 1 million records and be looking for the contacts and be doing it one after the other. So in order to do that, I would load a contact, but the account ID for that contact will be the external ID which I have. So for instance, if my contact for this RBC, okay, my contact for the RBC, this is RBC contact, right? I'll just call it name. RBC contact. Then I go to this one again. See RBC contact and everything. Contact. BMO contact. TD contact. What are the required fields when you're creating a contact? New. Then last name, okay. Last name. And obviously the record type, okay. The record type is internal contact or external contact, doesn't matter. Record type. Internal contact. I'll just put internal contact, or that's fine. But more importantly, you want to put the last name because the last name is required, okay? I'll just say last name is Olajide Baba John Doe, okay? So now the bottom line is this. This contact is related to RBC. So how do I know RBC accounts? The only way I can know RBC accounts from the legacy system is based on the ID that came with the legacy system. Because when I inserted a new account in the system, Salesforce gave me a new ID. So I cannot even know that ID unless I preserve the legacy system, okay? So now, if I want to load the accounts, load the contact to be loaded. I download the CSV. Okay, I've downloaded the CSV and let me get the CSV into the right folder. Okay, then I go to my data loader. I want to upsat. Remember, I'm not doing insert, I want to upsat, okay? Upsat meaning that I have an existing record that I would like to update and insert. What do I want to update? I want to update the account record to reflect the contact records. And I want to insert the contact records. So I'm going to upsat into this contact and contact to be loaded. Okay, next. It says 4 contacts, that's fine. And yeah, that's fine. This is where the magic comes in. This question helps me to ensure that the related ID for my upsat on the account object is the external ID. If I don't select this, the matching and the magic will not take place. So now I'm auto matching, and as you can see, it automatically gives you that. But guess what? I don't want to have this account ID. I can just say, this is the connection. This is very important, okay? This is a connection, not the account ID, because I don't have the account ID present. The account ID will be the Salesforce ID. However, I want to map the account ID with the external ID, okay? Then the name, do I have name? I think I have name. And the name should be, we don't have name in contacts. I can just use full name or first name, okay? Contacts usually give you first name, last name, salutation to make the full name, okay? Then the record type, I think the default record type will kick in. Okay, so let's go to the record type. This is also interesting. You have to, because we have a record type, and you have to get the record type ID, okay? But I think Salesforce is intuitive. If you don't, I think that there is a default record type. Let me see what happens when so the default record type is internal, okay? So if you don't have any record type selected, the internal record type will be selected, okay? So I will just leave the record type because the record type is internal record type or external record type, and I don't know the ID, I'll just leave it like that, okay? Then I do okay, okay? Then I do next. Then I know that I am importing, this is the response where the results will be popped up. Finish, yes, okay? We have 2 errors, 2 successes. Let's view the errors. So it says, what does it say? More than one record found for an external ID, meaning that it has the same record for an external ID, and an external ID needs to be unique. Okay, so if you're inserting, you need to be sure that the external ID which you're inserting needs to be unique. Okay, so this one we can just maybe reload this without the external ID and just use the upsat. But let's see the 2 successes that we have. View successes, and it says this, okay? RBC, CIBC, which is fine. And it says item created, okay? So that's fine, okay? And that's the objective of the exercise. The exercise is just to make sure that whenever we have a new contact coming into the system, it has an account, which is a CIBC contact. And the only way we can identify that account is because it is associated to the external ID for CIBC, and the account name is CIBC, okay? That's the ultimate goal for that exercise. But next time, you just create update, okay? You create update, and you'll be able to see for the other accounts that failed during the data exercise, okay? So that's how, and that's the purpose of the external ID, just to retain the legacy ID. So whenever you're uploading relationship, you can always associate that relationship with the external ID, okay? Does that help you, Ebube? Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, perfect, yeah.
Okay, no worries. I think that's all for me. Does anyone have any other question before we end the class for tonight? Okay, please, guys, I would like you to watch this video over and over again. You need it for your project. You need it for your work. Always learn how to use data loader, because data loader is one of the things you'll be doing. You'll be doing this almost every other day at work. If you're going to be working as a Salesforce consultant or Salesforce admin, you'll be manipulating data, and you'll be required to know why on when to use data import wizard and when to use data loader, okay? If there are no questions, we're going to move on, and we are going to stop here for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about duplicate management, how to identify duplicates, how to validate record and ensure that we do not have duplicates in the system. We're going to make sure that anytime we enter a record, it is valid. What if there is a requirement that says we shouldn't have backdated dates? You cannot say created date is yesterday when you're already creating it today, something like that. If you want to put those validation rules in place, you need to write them. So tomorrow we're going to be reviewing that. In addition to that, we're going to be creating reports and dashboard. Your manager asks you, how can I find all the contacts